I warned my son that his fiancée means trouble, and he threatened me with a restraining order, but now he's begging for money. I'm a 52-year-old man, a single father, and my son is 22. He has always been somewhat unpredictable, but I thought I had raised him to have some common sense. He likes skateboarding, did well in school, and usually listened when I imposed rules. However, lately he has been acting suspiciously, glued to his phone, sending messages all the time. I asked him who he was talking to, and he responds saying it's just a friend. It seems weird that he doesn't want to say who he's talking to, but it's okay, I suppose. Let's move forward a bit. He insisted that I meet the girl he's dating. We went to a coffee shop, and there she was, 25 years old, all made up with quite flashy jewelry. She had a fake laugh that bothered me that sounded like the one from the nanny character. I know I'm old. She said she was finding out what life had in store for her, and that she was staying at a friend's house. She had no real plans, no stability, she only talked about living in the moment. It gave me a bad vibe because basically this woman seemed like a parasite looking for a host, one that could give her money. My son, for his part, was completely smitten, smiling like a fool, saying that she was his future after just 1 month. I let it pass for a bit, thinking it was just a fleeting love and that it would simply fade with a little time. But then I heard them talking on the phone at my house about how the relationship was very serious, too serious, and I was part of that plan. She was pressuring him to move into her apartment, which I would pay for with the savings I had set aside for him years ago. When he finished talking to her, I told him, "She is going too fast. It seems like she is looking for something, and it's not love, it's your money." But he didn't want to listen to me and just attacked me because I was an old man, that I no longer believed in love because of my experience, and that's why I was living my life as a bitter person. We started shouting. He was telling me that I didn't trust his decisions, which wasn't wrong. It was the first time he spoke to me that way, and that he did something so foolish, but I really wasn't trusting that he was making the right decision at this moment. Finally, he told me that she would move in with him to a new apartment. I was not at all happy. Those savings I was talking about were for his future, not for him to spend on his wedding with a woman who, besides giving me a very bad feeling, I didn't know very well. I did some research on the internet, because after all I'm not that old, and I found old posts of her sharing memes, boasting about manipulating boys to give her money. Then it was full of photos of her partying practically all night. I'm not so old as to think that young people don't have to have fun, but I wouldn't marry someone who probably still had a hangover when she suggested the idea. I showed all this to my son thinking that he would open his eyes, thinking that he would see the warning signs, the huge red flags that were waving, but nothing. Instead, he accused me of invading his privacy for being jealous, and that if I kept insisting on this, he was going to cut me out of his life. He said that if I didn't accept the love he had found, it wouldn't cost him too much to fight for it and kick me out of his life. Let's move forward a bit more. She proposed to him, which is not a mistake in my writing or a mistake in your reading. You read it right. She proposed to him. And I'm not saying this because I'm old-fashioned and think a woman can't propose, but what's surprising here is that she was trying to trap him so shamelessly and he couldn't see it. She did it in a cheap bar, making a big public scene, with a cheap ring that she bought herself. Or at least that's what she said. She could have stolen it by taking it off the finger of someone who was wearing it minutes before. He said yes, and they set a wedding date just 3 months after meeting. I was speechless. 3 months and he was marrying this girl with no job, a shady past, and no plans. I sat him down and explained, being as didactic as possible so he would understand. I told him, look, she has no stability, she has a history of questionable behaviors, and you're diving headfirst into a disaster. You'll end up completely shattered if you go through with this. And he listened to me, he really did, but he didn't understand a single word. He said, you're not invited to the wedding unless you agree without asking questions. I told him I wasn't asking questions. I was throwing out facts that were easy to confirm. When I mentioned that this would probably be the biggest mistake of his life, if he wasn't going for a new record, he just looked at me furiously. In the end, he ended up saying that I had no right to ruin his day and that I could forget about his wedding and any future contact. I didn't stop trying to reach him. As a father, I was seeing the atomic explosion of his life, and I was going to fight for him. I contacted her mother. I thought that maybe she would see the reality. We met at a restaurant, and I told her everything. Her daughter is going too fast, has no direction, and my son is too young to tie himself down this way. Her mother didn't care. Foolish me to think that the daughter had turned out that way by fate. She had a great teacher. She called her daughter a free spirit, and then had the nerve to ask me if I could help with the wedding expenses. I laughed in her face and told her I wasn't going to fund a disaster. She got angry, left furious, while I was left thinking about the family of crazies my son was going to marry into. Later, my son called me shouting because I had meddled in his affairs by talking to his mother-in-law. He told me I was crossing boundaries and that he wouldn't hesitate to get a restraining order against me. And I understand, maybe I was meddling in his affairs, but it was for a good cause. No matter how good his fiancée is, which she isn't at all, it was a terrible idea to marry someone 3 months after meeting her. However, you can't threaten that and ask me for access to a $10,000 savings account that I had reserved for him years ago. I explained clearly, no, it's for emergencies, not for her to spend on a wedding. Someone who makes impulsive decisions isn't going to take no for an answer so easily, not without getting angry and feeling entitled to it. Then he blocked my number, cut me off completely. She sent me a message, very confident, saying, "You've lost because your son has chosen love over a stingy old man like you." I didn't respond. I didn't want to play that game anymore or keep getting involved in this mess. There's a certain amount of things a father can do for a son. He had never had a crush, an obsession with a girl as strong as this one. His previous relationships were more normal, although having a relationship with a palm tree would have been more normal than this. But I tried to open his eyes because I knew he was going through something bad and needed help. But if you try hard and the person doesn't want to receive help, it's not like you can do much. You just have to let the palm tree drop a ripe coconut on his head and wake him up. I ran out of options and energy to try to help him. It had to be what it had to be. The wedding day arrived and I wasn't there. He had forbidden me from attending, making it clear that I wasn't welcome unless I supported them. I didn't support them, so I was fine with the decision. Someone who went later told me how the show turned out. It was a ridiculous show. The venue was nice and there was an open bar, which isn't cheap. She wore a dress that, if I ask you to close your eyes and imagine someone with a free spirit, you probably have a perfect picture. To pay for all that, she took out loans and credit cards, accumulating debt like it was nothing. I was furious, not only with her, but with him for being so blind, but it wasn't my money. After that, I didn't try to contact him. I didn't want to be at the epicenter when it exploded. He wanted me out of his life, so I stayed out. He's an adult, and I'm not going to chase him to save him from his own stupidity. Besides, a 3-month relationship with a delusional woman like that, and a lot of debt, that sounded like a ticking time bomb in my head. What doesn't take away is that it makes me very angry and very powerless, which is why I'm writing perhaps. Update 1. If I had bet, I think I would have bet that everything would last much less, but as long as there was money, I suppose the relationship would continue. Someone who went to the wedding keeps me informed of everything that happens. He told me, "Your son is killing himself working overtime in a warehouse, trying to cover the bills." Meanwhile, she doesn't lift a finger, just sits around posting on social media about the things they spend on. They're living way beyond their means. I don't know how they can pay for all those things, but unless your son is a neurosurgeon and I didn't know it, they're going to have a lot of problems. I'm still blocked and complying with his request not to contact him if I don't have anything nice to say. I still haven't found anything to say. Some time passed and things started to go downhill. My son's best friend sent me a message saying they were in serious trouble. Their utilities were cut off because she has been wasting money everywhere and my son is too proud to admit that he's drowning. He's working to exhaustion, but it's not enough to cover their expenses and the rent. His friend told me he's stressed, barely sleeps, and starts losing patience with everyone. Still, I kept my distance. You want to call me a bunch of things. Well, this bunch of things isn't going to help you. He hadn't asked me for it up to this point, but that's what I thought. Then her fraud case came to light. She was convicted of a fraud she committed a couple of years ago, something related to faking a medical emergency to get online donations. Now she owes thousands of dollars in restitution. The problem is that for some reason my son is involved, even though it was before he met her. I don't know, maybe that scam was ongoing when she met him. So his name is involved in the case. His friend begged me to help cover a lawyer to get him out of his legal mess. I said no, but it's still getting worse. Someone was at a club and saw her hanging on another guy's neck, while my son was supposedly working the night shift. He sent me photos, her laughing with her arm around this guy, showing she doesn't have a care in the world. I guess that's what they call being free. He asked me what I wanted to do with these photos, whether to send them to my son or not. I replied that I wasn't going to send him anything, but he was free to do so. Anyway, he wouldn't believe me, maybe he would. He'd probably accuse me of editing them or something. His friend told me he has a miserable existence, knows she isn't acting right, but feels trapped by the loans they took out for the wedding and her spending. I shrugged when I heard that. Not my circus, not my monkeys. The last thing I know that puts them in more trouble is that they're going to be evicted. They haven't paid the rent in months, and the landlord is planning to evict them. I'm not going to cover their rent or get him out of this mess. Then her mother called me, complaining that the kids are struggling, asking if I could send some money to help them get by. I posed an existential doubt to her. It was something like, if you're a free spirit being, you could be free to help them. A soul in pain yearns for freedom and you could give it to them. It's always good to fight for the good cause. She replied that she had her own bills, that she couldn't give them that much money. It seems the spirit is free, but the bills pile up and you have to be responsible with money, so it's easier said than done. Typical. Everyone talks a lot, but when you throw blame and responsibilities, everyone disappears, throwing a smoke bomb behind them. Update 2. Some time has passed since my last post, but finally my son did what he had to do. He left that dollar shredder. One day he showed up at my door with the face of an emptied ATM. And he wasn't far from reality, because although he doesn't have circuits inside, he said that she had emptied their joint bank account and left him stranded with $20,000 in debt. He was fired from his warehouse job for missing shifts, probably because he was too busy being an ATM on the corner of an intersection. He was there to get money from me to start over, saying he only needed a little help. I told him to get lost. He stood there complaining that it was cold, but I pointed to the door in case he didn't know it. He left, still crying. Her mother had the nerve to call me, shouting that I am the reason their marriage fell apart because I didn't support them. I told her to look at her daughter who scammed my son and left. I looked online and sure enough, she's already living with another guy, posting photos of her new victim. I mean partner she's going to butcher, leave completely dry and then throw to the sharks. My son saw the post and his friend told me it shattered him. At least he keeps his shattering as far away from me as possible. He must be too ashamed to ask me for a favor face to face again. What he tried is to send me a text message, asking me to let him move back in. He said he didn't even have money to pay for a lawyer. I told him, no, you're an adult man. He made his decision, and I'm not going to set up a hotel for people with an "I told you so" sign on their forehead. His response was another message, where he suggests that I might not have warned him enough and that I should feel bad for him. No, I feel great. I didn't give all my money to his ex, so I don't know why I should feel bad right now. I even have roasted beef with mashed potatoes and gravy from the night before to heat up. I'm in paradise. His friend told me he's been sleeping on his sofa, but it's too small for an adult to sleep on. He didn't say comfortable, he just said sleep. She tried to send him a text saying she made a mistake and wants to talk. His friend had to step in to prevent him from falling back in. At least he finally got a job at a gas station. I don't know how much better that is than the previous one, but at least he's progressing. Not everyone will share my carefree style or free spirit if they want to about how to face this problem with my son. I don't want him to suffer, but I'm not going to lift a finger to help him after what he did. What bothered him about my warnings? That he was going to request a restraining order. Well, maybe he gave me an idea. But yes, I'm going to watch everything from afar without worrying about this. Especially now that my dinner is about to finish heating up, and I can already smell it coming from my kitchen. Time to close the computer and have dinner. Maybe I'll open it later to read comments. Update 3. This is what happens. My son is still a mess, sleeping in a shelter after she left him ruined with $20,000 in debt. His friend keeps me updated, saying he's barely managing working at a gas station, eating the minimum and dodging debt collectors, as if that were an Olympic discipline and he's competing for the gold medal. He wants to file for bankruptcy, but for that he needs money that he still doesn't have. Some asked about the new partner of my ex-daughter-in-law if she was planning another scam. It would be lying if I said yes with all certainty, but I can assume with 100% certainty that yes. I mean, we're talking about the same person. She's with that new guy she left with from what I've been told, posting about her new life, with fancy dinners and that kind of thing that looks good on social media. He might be a guy around 30 years old. He seems to have some money based on his car and all the places she tags him in. Some people also said I should warn this guy, but I thought, why would a guy who doesn't know me believe me when my own son didn't? But the other day I gathered some things and wrote him a message. I had nothing to lose. What was the worst that could happen? That a stranger doesn't invite me to his wedding and cuts me out of his life. That's practically a walk in the park for me. I didn't get a response, but I saw that shortly after she stopped mentioning him in her posts. I guess he got the message. And yes, he paid more attention to me than my own son. Of course, he's my son and I have some responsibility for having raised him. And I'm not the smartest mind in the neighborhood, but I didn't think my son could have inherited only my stupidity and discarded the rest. But you learn from hard knocks. And I'm not going to give him any knocks, although life is giving him some pretty big ones. Update 4. My son is still in a bad situation. I'm not going to sugarcoat it just to make me look good because I'm not actively helping. Well, passively either. He's still stuck in a shelter, working a dead-end job at a gas station and dodging debt collectors as if it were the mission of his life. His friend keeps me updated, tells me he's barely holding on, eating cheap noodles and looking like he's aged 10 years. At least he's been able to file for bankruptcy. And although now he has no credit cards or qualifications to rent, unless he wants to pay several months in advance, it's a good step. It will take time for him to rebuild his credit score, but at this point he has no other way out. It will be years before he recovers from this blow, but that's what you get when you rush into marriage and marry a red flag in just 3 months. It will be a long time before my son wants to marry again, which means lesson learned. Another positive news is that at least regarding his ex-wife's scam, with whom he's now divorced, he was able to distance himself from that problem. The debts from the wedding and other expenses don't disappear, but all the scam stuff is one less problem to face. The justice system is still investigating his ex-wife, and they've determined that my son wasn't involved in all that. The investigation into his ex is still ongoing. It's very likely that for this reason she no longer posts on her social media or anything about her new partner, although she still has some photos with him. But he doesn't, but nothing else. She's keeping a low profile and she's going to need it with all her scams. I've been told that my son wants to sue his ex for fraud, but I'm not going to tell him what to do. I don't think it constitutes fraud for your ex to make you spend all your money and money you didn't have on her. I'd rather call it using the head down below. I had some hopes that he was learning something, becoming smarter, discovering how the world works, and instead he takes 2 steps forward and 1 back. We can be optimistic and say that at least there's progress. But my pessimistic and realistic part thinks that with all that happened, it should be completely forward. What did bring a tear to my eye from emotion, from the happiness it caused me, is seeing that the investigation has also decided to involve the mother in the scam. I start to think that being free spirit beings also involves being scammers. I don't know why I'm not surprised, but it has put me in a very good mood. That's a summary of everything that's been happening in my life lately. And no, I don't have any more of that meat left. It ran out that same night. Believe me, I wouldn't joke about something like that. I also wish I still had a little to heat up right now and not have to eat the bland food waiting for me. Maybe it's time for a trip to the supermarket to cook myself a bit more of all that. Update 5. Do you know what's waiting for me in the oven when I finish this update? What will be accompanied by a huge pan of mashed potatoes? That's right. So if this has spelling errors or is written very quickly, you know duty calls. And you'll wonder why I'm so dressed up today, even though you can't see how well I'm dressed to eat at home. It's not for dinner. I am because I'm celebrating right now. I wouldn't have taken out my best shirt when I knew that when I cut that meat, a bit of gravy might fall on it. I did it because I'm celebrating that we already have the verdict for my ex-daughter-in-law and my ex-mother-in-law. The first sentenced to 3 years for fraud, and the second to 18 months for having helped her. I celebrate that justice is working and functioning well, but also the fact that it has put 2 free spirits like them behind bars, where they deserve to be. It's ironic, which is why I've also carefully chosen the wine to celebrate all these beautiful things happening right now. It's not that I haven't eaten something like this since the last time, but today the gravy is perfect, the meat is premium, and I have ice cream waiting for me for dessert. I'm struggling not to stop writing this and do it tomorrow, but I know that many of you also hated them. And if there are more people celebrating with me from a distance tonight, even better. Now about my son, I don't have much to update you on, or maybe it's not important enough to write here and let my food get cold, so this ends here. Update 6. So much time has passed since I made the first post that I don't know how many of you will remember the first one. Maybe you haven't even read it and this is the first time you're hearing about me, my son, and the sewer rat he married, plus her mother, who would be like a bigger rodent. When I told him that not only was it a bad idea to get married after 3 months of dating, but it was like shooting himself in the foot with a cannonball from an 18th century pirate ship, he got angry with me. Worse, he shouted at me and said that if I couldn't leave his fiancée and him alone, he would have to get a restraining order against me. Since I'm a person who understands hints, I simply let him make his own decisions. If you want to know what the consequences of his decisions are, there you have my posts. But now he's divorced, has found a better job, and has even been able to rent his own apartment. But since he filed for bankruptcy, no one wants to accept the typical requirements, the first and last month. They want 6 months in advance, at least. But somehow he managed it. Good for him. Recently he got in touch with me and told me all these things, how long it took him to gather the 6 months and all that. However, the meeting came with a but and with the saddest violin music in the world. He wasn't asking, he wasn't thinking out loud, he wasn't wishing, no, what he wanted was a car, and he asked me if the money I had saved for him was still available. I told him no. I mean it was, but not for him, I mean not to buy a car. He was angry with me and told me that he had come a long way and I was being mean by still being angry with him. I told him I wasn't angry, but that I was proving my point that he still hadn't improved at all, and that's why the money was going to remain unspent. Then I asked him to leave, which made him start harassing me and which made me get a restraining order against him. I'll spare you the details of the harassment, but I can tell you that one night he started banging on my windows, my door, and everything he found to get me to open up right on a special night. I was prepared to eat my favorite food. Yes, I know again. Sue me. I like my meat with mashed potatoes and gravy, like others like hamburgers, pizza, or lasagna. So I called the police and all my food got cold. I also had to watch that no police officer used a spoon in my mashed potatoes while they were there. And although it wasn't for this, obviously, I had to file a restraining order, which has given me peaceful nights for over a month, and it's the only thing I care about. I don't care how sad his story is that his new job is very far away, while that apartment is the only neighborhood he can afford. Here's a lesson, and it is, you shouldn't have gotten married without thinking. But also, don't mess with special dinner nights.